Dental. Comprehensive dentistry at 14 convenient locations in Springfield, Chicopee, Longmeadow, West Springfield, Belchertown, East Longmeadow, Ludlow, Northampton, Greenfield, and Wilbraham, as well as 29 Broad Street in Westfield. Bay State Dental makes it a priority to help you achieve and maintain the healthy smile you deserve. On the web at baystatedental.com.
We thank the generosity of our underwriters. For more information, please contact the Westfield State Foundation at 413-572-8646.
Thursday morning from 6 till 8, it's Patrick Berry, owner of the Westfield News Group.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM, WSKB, Westfield.
Oh, yes, sir. Help. Step up, step up. Get help. Get help. Step up. Step up, step up. Get help, get help. Come on down to the Village Vortex, home of that new jazz rage. Swing, rock and roll to the beat, beat, beat of Speedy Valenti and his crazy cats. Swing, dig the rhythm. Swing.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Arts Beat Radio here on 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm Mark Auerbach, your host, and we're back on Fridays every week from 8 to 9. The music that we introed the program with today is by Leonard Bernstein. It's from the musical Wonderful Town, and it's called Swing. And this is the 100th birthday year of Leonard Bernstein. And if you're headed to Tanglewood this summer, you'll have an opportunity to hear a lot of the music he composed for the theater, and as well as for the classical genre, symphonies, choral works, and what have you. But do go check the Tanglewood schedule, because Tanglewood opens in a couple of weeks, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a pure sign of summer. We've got a couple of great guests for you today, and our first guest is Daniel Elihu Kramer, who's the artistic director of the Chester Theater Company. And the Chester Theater, just up the road on Route 20, maybe 25 minutes from Westfield, has gotten national prominence. And as the New York Times and the Boston Globe and all of the other media are touting where to go this summer to see good theater, Chester Theater is on the top of their list. And welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
Always great to have you on the program. And you've got a great lineup this summer of interesting works and plays that are not necessarily seen in theaters around here in New England.
That's right. I mean, I think, as you were saying already, Chester, I think the reason we've been getting attention is because people know that there are plays we're going to offer that you might not get to see anywhere else around here. And that's something that I think our audiences have started to rely on us for. We have a couple of things going that I'd love to talk about, but we go into rehearsals on Monday for our very first play, so let me start with that, if I can.
Sure.
We are doing what will be the U.S. premiere of a wonderful play called Bar Mitzvah Boy. And the Bar Mitzvah Boy in question turns out to be a gentleman in his 60s who goes into a synagogue and announces to the female rabbi that he needs a bar mitzvah, that he doesn't have much time, and that this Tuesday would be good, if that's fine with her. And things turn out to be somewhat more complicated, and it's an amazing play that starts out feeling purely like comedy and turns out to be really moving and really thoughtful, and we come to know these two characters in a pretty beautiful way.
How did you find the play?
We do a lot of different things as I'm casting around trying to find out about stuff. This was a script that had sort of come across my way before it had been produced anywhere. The playwright is actually Canadian, a wonderful playwright named Mark Byron Young. And I've been reading the script and was getting more and more curious about it, reached out directly to him. It turned out he was about to have the world premiere of it in Vancouver, which just took place this spring. And in fact, he's going to be joining us for the opening. We're looking forward to having him there. It's also going to have, as a cast, one actor people out this way may not know, but a wonderful actor who did most of his career in Boston named Will LeBeau, but then also Tara Franklin, whom people will know from a great deal of work at Berkshire Theater Festival, at Chester, and elsewhere.
I'm a major Tara Franklin fan. I've seen her in many things, and actually the last Arts Beat Radio, I had the opportunity to interview her husband, James Barry, and the two of them are part of a new wave of actors that are based here in the Berkshires and Western Massachusetts and work in the area theaters and then travel elsewhere to do work. And it's great that Chester is helping build this group of actors and creative people who can live and work in Western Massachusetts.
I think it's amazing. I think the trend that you're talking about is real, and I think it's wonderful to think that there's a theater scene enough to become a base for artists at that level. As you know, and as I'm sure James and you discussed, we actually get to bookend the summer with that couple, since Tara will be in our first show, Bar Mitzvah Boy, and then I have the pleasure of directing James in the final show of the summer, The Aliens, by Annie Baker, who, by the way, is another Western Massachusetts connection.
I was going to say she is from Amherst. Does she still live in Amherst, or?
She doesn't. She's New York based now, but her family's still up here. She's still up a fair bit. She's come and done some stuff with students at Amherst High, and she's certainly stayed involved with the area.
And in between, you talked about the opening of the season and the closing. In between, you have a play that has been well known in New York, but just is beginning to make its way, as they say, into the provinces.
Absolutely. So our second play of the season was actually the 2013 Pulitzer Prize winner, a play called Disgraced by the playwright Ayad Akhtar. And it has at its center a couple where he is a Pakistani-American corporate lawyer. She is a white wasp painter working in Islamic art themes. And it is a pretty astonishing and explosive play. It centers around a dinner between them and another couple. And Kristen Van Genhoven, artistic director of Wham Theater, will be directing it. And as you say, it certainly got attention in New York and in Chicago, where it was actually first developed, but has not been seen anywhere in this area. And actually, speaking of area actors and folks, wonderful artists who made their lives in this area, Kim Stauffer, whom a lot of folks will know from her work at Barrington Stage as well as at Chester, will be playing Emily, the painter, in that production.
And another one of his works, The Invisible Hand, is at TheaterWorks in Hartford right now. What is it about this particular playwright that is causing theaters all over the country to want to do his works?
Ayad is, I think, a remarkably thoughtful playwright, which is to say both that he's deeply intelligent, but that he's able to structure his plays in ways that introduce you to characters but make you grapple with ideas and with your own preconceptions, so that the plays are always gripping. He knows how to write a story that will hold you and characters whom you'll invest in. But at the same time, I think that there's always so much to think about, and certainly it's the case in this country that we are still we still don't have nearly as many voices who come out of a Muslim or Muslim American, in his case, partly English experience. And so I think he also offers us a view of the world that we rarely get to see on stage.
When you're picking plays and you're looking at alternative voices to express things that we don't normally see every day on the theater scene, and you're introducing people to these works, do they come back and say, give us more, give us another voice, another point of view?
Absolutely. I think that that's been one of the really exciting things about the last couple of years has been that each time we take a step to say, hey, we want to keep giving you a broader view of what America is about. We want to keep giving you a broader view of what the world is about. We want to keep giving you perspectives that you may not have thought about. Every time that happens, our audiences have been enormously responsive and have said, yeah, that's something we want. Bring us more. Exactly. And I think part of what happens is you go to the theater, you look on stage, and maybe you see on stage somebody who doesn't look like you. And by the time an hour and a half or 2 hours have passed, you realize how much you and that person are also like each other, so that there's a way in which dropping into these people's lives helps narrow the gap, I think, between us and people whose lives we may not know very well.
How come people are willing to take the risk and attend a play that will broaden their horizons and challenge them a little bit, but they don't take that same risk when they turn on their television set or go to the movies?
It's interesting. There's something, that's a great distinction, Mark. I think there's something about sharing a room that is really different. You know, there's an enormous distance that happens, I think, when you watch TV, when you watch movies. And I'm not putting it down. I love doing both. But I do think that there's, you know, the thing you're watching actually happened somewhere else a long time ago. And what you're seeing is, you know, sort of these traces of it. And when you're at a theater, and frankly, especially when you're at a theater as intimate as Chester, I think there's this sense of sharing a room, of sharing a space, and it becomes much more evident that we're all a bunch of people in a room together. And I think that that sharing makes a kind of community. And, you know, watching TV doesn't make community. It may entertain you. It may even provoke you, but I don't think it can make community in the same way the theater can.
I've noticed that this year, in covering some of the shows that I've covered, that the audience pays rapt attention to something that if they were sitting back and watching the same event or same performance on television, they'd be flipping channels, or they might be getting up and going to get a snack or something like that. But they go into a theater, they're open-minded, and they can sit there and pay complete 100% attention to what's going on. And it astounds me because I don't know for myself. I mean, that's the way I behave when I go to the theater all the time. And I don't look towards television or movies in the same light. But I wonder what it is for other theater goers.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that in a world where we increasingly have distractions, so if you're watching TV, as you said, you can just be like, change the channel, what else is on, let me flip around. And, you know, just the fact that we walk around all day with these astonishing little computers in our pockets, and you know, nobody can stand to be bored waiting in line at the grocery store for 2 minutes anymore. And the opportunity, I think, at a good play is the opportunity to let all of that distraction filter away, and to let yourself be pulled into a story and pulled into a world and pulled into characters. And we don't get that chance very often anymore. I know when I go to a play that lets me do that, what I feel most of all is grateful to have had that immersion and that experience.
I feel very fortunate. I mean, I loved theater as entertainment, too. I mean, I'm not always going to the theater because I need intellectual stimulation, but there is something about the interaction between what's happening on stage and what's happening in the audience that really pulls me in, and you can feel it when I'm sitting and reviewing a show, and my eye kind of scans to see whether the audience is paying attention and how they're reacting. It changes from minute to minute, but you can tell when a production or a performance is riveting its audience, and you can also feel when the audience is totally engaged, where you don't get that when you go to a movie.
It isn't the same experience, certainly. I just think that there's a more shared thing going on, and as you say, theater is also a great source of entertainment, but even sharing that entertainment together has an excitement. You know, when I also teach directing at Smith College, and when I work with my directing students, I say there's nothing that will teach you more than watching a run of your play with an audience. And it's not because you'll see exactly what they think, but you'll feel what they're feeling, and you'll feel the experience that they're having. And to sit with an audience is a wonderful thing.
You've got one more show to describe for us, I believe. We've talked about 3, and there's a 4th, correct?
There's a fourth, and then there's actually one more beyond that we'll talk about.
Okay.
But yes, in our main stage season, we also have a beautiful play called Mary's Wedding, which is fascinatingly both, I would say, three things at once. It is a romance, it is a play, it is a dream, and it's a play about war, about a young couple, a farm boy and a young English woman, who meet and fall in love. Then he goes off to World War I. And in a kind of dream, she becomes his sergeant on the front. And it's a really astonishingly beautiful play. Very excited about it.
And I know that you've mentioned a couple of the people that are coming to perform. Don't you have another returning actor involved in the very last play who was in I and You last year?
We actually have two other returning actors in that play. So Paul Pontrelli, who's a young actor who's just now receiving his MFA from NYU, was up last summer in our production of Lauren Gunderson's play I Am You, which was a big hit with audiences. And he's coming back to play a young high school student again, who essentially is doing his best to learn about life, but unfortunately only has two sort of 30-something dropouts who hang out behind the coffee shop where he works to learn about life from. And James Barry is one of them, and then also Joel Ripka, who has been on our stage a number of times and won a Berkshire Theater Award last year for his work in Every Brilliant Thing, will be joining James as the two guys who hang out behind the coffee shop. So we're very excited about the actors who are returning to us this summer.
That's absolutely great. And what's the surprise show?
Yes. So in the middle of the summer, we are doing a very crazy thing. We're doing a piece by an Iranian playwright, and the play is called White Rabbit, Red Rabbit. We're doing only 4 performances of it. It needs a different actor every night, and in fact, no actor has ever performed this play 2 times, because the actor does not see the script until the moment she or he comes out on stage in front of the audience, opens an envelope, and pulls the script out and lays eyes on it for the very first time, and then proceeds to perform it.
Wow. Is the script the same every night?
It is. There are certain things that can vary within it, though much of the script is absolutely set. There are some things that can vary. And we have 4 performances of that coming, 3 of which we have set performers for. In fact, I can reveal one of them on your show, which hasn't come up before. So we had already announced that Joel Ripka, whom I've mentioned, will be doing one. That Deborah Jo Rupp, an actress people will know from a lot of her work in the Berkshires, as well as from television and film.
That 70s show.
Yes, exactly. She was the mom on
and
that
she was Dr.
show.
Ruth. And
she was.
I saw her, I believe it was in Hartford at TheaterWorks. She is now a Berkshire resident and perhaps has always been, but another person who can base themselves here in Western Massachusetts and work all over the country.
Absolutely, and we're very excited. She's done a couple of shows at Chester as well, and we're very excited even just for one evening to be able to get her back. As I said, we have 4 slots for that one, and we've announced so far Joel and Deborah Jo. I can tell you that with the third one will be Daniel Osman. And folks who don't know Daniel, if you know the Dreamaway Lodge in Beckett, Daniel runs that place. But he is also a marvelous actor. He is the only lodge owner I know who also spends part of his winter studying voice in Scotland. And he will be coming out to do one of our performances as well. And within the next week or so, I expect to be able to announce our final performer.
Has this play been done elsewhere?
It has. It was actually done in New York. I'm going to get the number of years wrong, 2-3 years ago, something like that. And it ran for a while with obviously a different performer every night, ranging from Nathan Lane did it to Kathy Najimy did it to Whoopi Goldberg did it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's been quite a range of folks who did it when it was in New York. And it is a very special experience, and we're very excited to be bringing on such a great batch of actors through to be sharing it with the audience.
Obviously, you've read the script. Is it? It requires improvisation. Then, if you're going to open an envelope when you sit down on the stage, and try it out, so to speak. But does it play differently depending on who's doing it?
Absolutely. So certainly there is a set script, but as you said, it of course requires a certain amount of improvisation, especially because you're figuring out what to do and how to go about it as you go. And it will be different every night. In fact, I already know of one critic who has asked for tickets to a number of the performances, not to review them, but just to have that experience of seeing how does it change from one time to the next? What is the difference as one actor or another actor tries to grapple with this craziness?
As we're talking about the Chester Theater season, we should probably tell our listeners how they can find out more information. And the website is Chester Theater, and theater being spelled RE.org. And the whole season is posted up there, along with some of your other special programs. And one of the things that Chester does really well is theater trips. And not your typical let's go to Broadway and see 4 or 5 shows, but to theater in Chicago or theater in Washington, D.C., and theater in London. What theater trips do you have planned for the next year?
Well, next March we will be doing, as we do every March, our London trip, and that's always a really pretty amazing week, Mark. We spend a week in London. We hear from the New York Times theater critic in London, Matt Wolfe. We see 5 plays. We get together and discuss the plays that we've had the chance to see, all kinds of great stuff. But this fall, we're doing a brand new trip that we've not done before, which is we are going to Canada, and we are going to do a combined trip to the Stratford Theatre Festival and to Toronto to see theater. We're going to see 3 plays in Stratford, 2 in Toronto, and I'm super excited about this one. It's fun to have a new trip, and I think it's interesting. We've barely announced it, and people have already started calling and saying, how do I sign up? I want to go.
Well, I know that Stratford is very well known, but isn't Toronto's theater scene a rival of New York's?
Toronto is the 3rd most active theater city on the continent, and it is an astonishing theater scene. Everything from Canadian Stage, which is the largest nonprofit theater company in Canada, to a company called Soul Pepper, to Taproot, to all kinds of other places. And I'll be honest, it's a scene that I know largely by reputation, and I'm as excited as anybody, I think, to have a chance to go learn more about it firsthand.
And the itinerary is now on your website, and as if people can make reservations.
Absolutely. So there's information, as you said, on our season, all 4 of our main stage plays, White Rabbit, Red Rabbit in the center, but also about both the Stratford Toronto tour and the London tour. And you can do all kinds of great things on our website about all of those things.
Daniel, how long does it take, or how long a period of time from first rehearsal at Chester to opening night?
So it is just about 3.5 weeks. In fact, as I said, we're about to start our first one, so that's a great example. This Monday, the 28th, we seem to be doing a very bad job of celebrating Memorial Day this year. We will be starting our first rehearsals for Bar Mitzvah Boy, and that's a Monday. 3 weeks from then, we will begin our technical rehearsals, where we will put in lighting and sound and really get all of those details that lift the show up put together. We'll do that for about a half a week. And then on Thursday, June 21st, so in total 24 days later, we will be at an opening night.
And then the minute the first show opens, the second one is already in rehearsal, right?
So by the time the first show opens, the second show will have been rehearsing for about a week and a half. So if we start rehearsals on Monday for Bar Mitzvah Boy, 2 weeks later we'll begin rehearsals for Ayat Akhtar's play Disgraced. So at that point we have 2 full casts in residence. As you know, the actors we have who don't come from the area are largely New York-based actors, and we house a lot of them. And we will have both of those things going at once. So there's a period where we are a very, very busy place. And Chester's a pretty great place to be around then. It's a beautiful little village, and they've been increasingly excited that we're there and to be welcoming us. And it's kind of great to see our actors and other artists becoming a part of that community during the time that they're with us.
I was going to say that the Chester Theater really has an impact on the town of Chester and the surrounding communities, because you're bringing a lot of audience into Chester, but also you've got a cast and a crew living there for the period of time that they rehearse and perform.
Absolutely. And Chester is part of a whole project that a few of the Gateway Hill towns are involved in. And I think there's a lot of really great energy there, and I'm excited by the ways that Chester Theater Company can contribute to that. And I think we really are able to make a difference there. And I also love how welcome we feel. We began a program recently where all Chester residents actually can come to all of our plays for $10 each. And it's been really great finding ourselves surrounded by our neighbors when we sit there and watch a play.
Daniel, you've been at Chester for several years, but you took over the artistic leadership. How many years ago was that?
This will be my third summer as artistic director there. So as you say, I started working there first just as a hired director in 2010, and then a play of mine was produced there in 2011, Pride or Prejudice. And in 2012, I started working with Brian Stevens, the longtime artistic director, as his associate. And when he decided that he wanted to step down, I was fortunate enough to be chosen. And so that was fall of 2015. Summer of 2016 was my first season, and this will be my third. So by now I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, Mark.
Well, but you've made an imprint. I mean, a lot of your artistic choices are far different than what Chester did before you arrived on the scene. Do you have a wish list for some of the direction that you want to take Chester in the next couple of years?
I do. I think one of the things is we've been known for a long time as a place to see new plays, but we have only had intermittent opportunities to develop new plays ourselves. One of the things that I'm very excited about is working to develop more of a new play and a playwriting residency program. We just received a grant, we just found out this past month, from the Massachusetts Cultural Council Facilities Fund for $44,000, which will go halfway toward renovating the house that has our offices, houses our interns, and one of the things that that'll make possible for us is an off-season playwriting residency program. I hope to have a pretty great announcement to make at some point this summer about a commissions play that we're looking ahead to. So certainly new play development is something that I'm very excited to see in our future. And I think, as you've already mentioned, working to continue to diversify the stories we tell and the artists we're fortunate enough to invite up to help us tell them is part of what we're up to. So I think that we've always been known for new plays, and we want to increasingly be a source of new plays for the theater world beyond ourselves.
Well, Daniel, we're running out of time here, but I want to thank you for getting up early on a Friday morning of a 4-day holiday weekend to join us on the resumption of Artsbeat Radio on a weekly basis. And I hope that perhaps later on in the summer you'll come back and talk about the fall travel programs and some of the new works that you're considering. And again, you can learn all about the Chester Theater and buy tickets and subscribe and all of that good stuff at their website, chestertheater.org. Daniel Elihu Kramer, thanks for joining us. We're going to take an underwriting break here on Artsbeat Radio to thank some of the businesses that make community radio programming possible here on 89.5 FM WSKB. And when we come back with the second half hour of Artsbeat Radio, we're going to get to talk with Graham Rowett, who is the star of Church and State, which opens at Berkshire Theater Group very soon. And he's also coming back to the Berkshires after having done some Broadway. And one of the things you're going to learn about him is he does a lot of audiobooks. And I'm curious to find out how you record a book. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Westfield Bank. For more than 160 years, Westfield Bank has been an important community presence and commercial leader in the Pioneer Valley. With convenient full banking services in Westfield, West Springfield, East Longmeadow, Agawam, Feeding Hills, Springfield, Southwick, as well as Enfield and Granby, Connecticut, visit us on the web at westfieldbank.org.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield. Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
We thank the generosity of our underwriters. For more information, please contact the Westfield State Foundation at 413-572-8646.
He rules the roost on Thursday from 6 till 10. It's Patrick Berry.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from the campus of Westfield State University, this is 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Arts Beat Radio here on 89.5 FM WSKB. I'm Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our engineer. And Peter and I were talking before we began the show. We're going out on the road this summer with Arts Beat Radio, and in July we'll be up at the Berkshire Theater Group doing a 2-hour special. And a couple of days later going out to the Cranwell Resort in Lenox, where we'll be producing a 2-hour special with the Capitol Steps. But the reason I mentioned Berkshire Theater Group, it's their 90th anniversary season, and we've been covering them for quite some time. We're very lucky this morning to have Graham Rowett, who is starring in their next production called Church and State. He's on the line with us this morning. Good morning, and thanks for getting up so early on Friday.
Good morning, Mark. Thanks for having me. Not a problem.
Have you started rehearsals already for Church and State?
We have. We are on day 5 today.
And this is, I'm trying to count back how many shows you've done for Berkshire Theater Group, but I know I saw you in Bells Are Ringing, and I know I saw you in A Little Night Music, and Constellations, and Arsenic and Old Lace, and I may have missed one there.
No, I think that's the whole collection right there.
What brings you back to the Berkshires?
Well, I think that it's a rare occasion when a performer meets an artistic director like Kate McGuire, who sees us. She can see an actor, and she celebrates the performer and sincerely looks at them and says, "Hey, what I can see you do more than just one thing." And quite often, as actors, we get not pigeonholed, but quite often we can, the casting directors and directors see you in a certain way, and Kate McGuire can see you for all the things you do, and on top of that, she gives you the opportunity to do those other things you're good at, and it's really exciting to have a relationship with her. And so this show, so in New York, I might my little. All right, I will use the word pigeonhole then, so that's what I'm going to do. My pigeonhole might be musical theater, which I enjoy, but Kate McGuire also sees me as someone who can act in non-musical theater, and she will ask me my interest in wonderful plays, and Church and State is a wonderful contemporary, important play, and the fact that she offered me the chance to star in it was, you can't resist. She makes you an offer every year that you can't resist.
Did you know much about the play before you agreed to do it?
No, I didn't know anything about it, and it's very exciting when someone says, "Hey, I wonder if you'd be interested in doing this play," and that itself is such a nice thing to hear. So then you sit down for an afternoon with the play, and once I finished it, I was sort of knocked on my butt a bit by it, and I did some research on the production history, and then I met with the director, Charlotte Cohn, for coffee, and we talked, and I got to say, though, once I finished reading the play, you can tell that impulse inside that says, I need to do this, I need to be a part of this, and then it's just about figuring out the logistics.
I don't know much about the play other than that it's a very new play. It had a successful run, and it's been well received, but it's very politically timely.
Yes, it's an interesting play to try to describe because in one sentence, it is about a Republican senator running for re-election who is having a crisis of conscience following a school shooting. And to say it in that way would indicate that it is a very serious play. And that would sort of do it a disservice, but because it's like any story or any subject matter, there are serious elements and there are humorous elements. And you can't just tell a story for 90 minutes of somber, serious dialogue, and any good playwright would probably know to avoid that. So this show deals with very serious and contemporary topics, but they find ways, because of the people involved in telling them, to work your way from the serious to the comedic to the and back and forth, and make it an entertaining play. And it's not, even though it's dealing with some very serious things.
And when does Church and State open?
We begin performances on June 14th. I believe the official opening is June 16th, and it runs through June 30th.
Now, last summer you were in the Berkshires doing Arsenic and Old Lace, which is a classic rarely performed. And what did you do in New York in between? I know that you did Sunset Boulevard either before Arsenic Old Lace or shortly thereafter, but you did a brand new play last year.
Yes, I was lucky enough to do Sunset Boulevard last spring prior to doing Arsenic and Old Lace, and then in the fall I did a new Steve Martin play on Broadway called Meteor Shower, and I am a huge Steve Martin fan since I was in high school. I remember when I got my first Walkman with a recording microphone on it, and I held it up to the TV and recorded the Steve Martin movie Roxanne, and I would listen to it on my way to school. And I was very much into Steve Martin, so to become involved in a Steve Martin play was a dream come true. And I was hired as it's a four-person play, Meteor Shower, and it's a comedy, as you might assume. And I was hired to be the standby for the two male actors in the production, Keegan-Michael Key and Jeremy Seamus.
How often did you get to go on?
There was one glorious performance. It's funny when on the occasions that I've understudied in musicals, because singing is such a singers can when they get a tickle in the back of their throat, it can affect their sound a lot more quickly than in a non-musical play. So I went into this experience not expecting to go on. Because it was also a very short play, so I imagine that an actor coming in who's feeling a little under the weather is like, well, I can do this, and then I'll go home and rest. But the fifth final show of the run, the actor Jeremy Seamus, he got sick. His daughter was sick, and he caught the bug, and he gave me a heads up the night before that he thought he might be out. And I couldn't believe it, because I thought I might go the whole run without going on, but there was one night, and I got the phone call nice and early the next day, and I had lots of time to perform, and about 2 hours before the show itself, all the principal actors came in, and we ran through everything on stage, and by showtime I was ready to go.
And Amy Schumer was in that, correct?
Yes, she was. Amy Schumer and Laura Benanti were the female leads. And
what a great cast!
Yeah, it was great. It was an interesting experience because the very first day I went into rehearsal, it had been 10 days. The principal actors have been rehearsing for 10 days, and I was called in. The standbys, they like to give the principals a chance to get some, stuff under their belt before the standbys are there watching them and writing stuff down. But I came in, and I was called the day before. They said, Graham, could you look over this character's scenes, because this actor has some fittings, and so we might need you to stand in. I was like, wow, that's surprising on the first day. And I got to rehearsal, and it turns out the actor had actually been let go from the production, and had been replaced by Jeremy Shamus. Now, I don't know really what happened or why he was let go. It could likely have been a mutual decision. But on that one day, my first day, they said to me, hey, Steve's coming in today to listen to a new scene. We're going to need you to stand in. And so I found myself on my feet with the pages in hand with Amy Schumer and Keegan-Michael Key and Laura Benetti, and then Steve Martin comes in and says hi and sits down to watch the scene. And internally there's this voice that's screaming that I can't believe this is happening. And thankfully all my years of training allowed the exterior to be calm and relaxed. And so it was a really, really amazing day. I don't think that any day after that, until I went on those month or two later, ever compared.
What of the shows that you've done, is there any particular production that you recall that was your most challenging?
Well, I'm gonna say the one of the top. I kind of start to accumulate my top 5 theater experiences that I'm going to remember for my whole life. And I think Church and State is going to be one. And challenging is a great question. I'm kind of falling back on the ones that are the most significant or special to me. The production I did 2 summers ago of Constellations with my wife, Kate, I'm just going to go with that one because it was 71 minutes, 75 minutes with just her and I on a little round dais of a stage with no props, no set pieces, no costume changes, and I think I mentioned neither of us left the stage for that entire 71 minutes. And this show jumped around in time. Scenes would restart. So you'd have 4 or 5 different variations on the same scene. And it was intensely challenging in that regard. But at the same time, as a performer, you walk away from that experience thinking that was amazing. And I think not always, but as performers, what we really crave is to use the full range of our skills. I imagine if you do that a lot, you'll probably really look forward to the opportunities when you only have to come out and sing a song and go back to your dressing room. But I crave the opportunity to use everything I can do, and that was one of them. And I think Church and State is going to be a close second.
Now, you've acted opposite your wife, Kate Baldwin, who's currently in Hello, Dolly. Right. You've acted opposite her several times at Berkshire Theater, A Little Night Music, Bells Are Ringing, and Constellations. Is it more of a challenge because you're acting opposite your wife, who you know so well in everyday life, and yet you're assuming characters who may or may not know each other well? That must be a very there's got to be a lot of pressure there.
It is an unusual experience. On one hand, people can assume, and I think I even assume sometimes, that it's going to be easier because there's a familiarity there. And over time, I've realized that it's almost an advantage when you don't know the person you're acting opposite, because you can use your imagination to project everything you need onto them. for example, the performers I'm working with right now, I didn't know. I knew Keira Naughton a little bit. So there's a woman playing my wife, and when she starts saying the lines of the character and I start saying the lines of my character, it's very easy to pretend. And when you're opposite your wife on stage, there were occasions where I'd be looking at her and saying something, and an expression would pass over her face, and I couldn't quite tell whether it was her character responding to what I was saying or whether it was my wife sort of commenting on what I was doing. And that might say more about me than it does about my wife and my own paranoia. But that would sometimes, I couldn't quite tell if she was thinking to herself, is that how you're going to say that? Or there might be a moment where we would be standing opposite each other, and if I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the concept of upstaging someone, but the idea is that if you're both standing, if the audience is to your left or to the person's opposite you, to their right, and you're standing and looking at each other, if one of you happens to be standing further upstage towards the back of the stage, then the person who's talking has to turn away from the audience and towards you, and therefore the audience can't see their face or expression, and that's referred to as upstaging. So there'd be times if I was slightly further upstage than my wife, I could see her sort of take a half step up to be on the same plane at me, and there'd be an expression on her face which was, don't upstage me.
When people were talking about some of the things that they know your work from, you do a lot of audiobook recording.
Yes.
And I'm just really curious, how long does it take to record a book? And do you walk into a studio like our radio studio and just sit there and read it? Or is there a director who tells you, take a breath here, create a voice here? How does it work?
Sure. I have a long-standing relationship with a company called Recorded Books, which it doesn't sound like the most inventive name, but it turns out that they were one of the very first audiobook companies that came along. It was them and a company called Books on Tape. And luckily, Recorded Books, their title aged a lot better than Books on Tape. And the way it works is that they send you the book, and you pre-read the book, and you write down a list of all the words that you may have a question about pronouncing. And you send that word list in, and you get it back, and then you go into the studio to record, and you're paired up with an engineer who is outside the booth and running the recording equipment, but they're also listening to you as you read and following along in the book, so they'll try and catch you if you switch a word, and that'll save them some time later if they can catch your mistakes as you go. But there's something, and then you sit in the booth and off you go. I try to keep my characters subtle. I think that Recorded Books prefers you to make small choices versus large choices in terms of if I switch to a woman's voice, I just sort of raise my pitch a little bit. My nightmare is on those occasions where the character is suddenly there's a giant interview with reporters from all over the world. That, I think, was my nightmare, and suddenly there's the Australian reporter and the Spanish reporter and British reporter. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. But I don't know what it is. I think I always envision myself with a really exciting voiceover career, and that itself is a really hard business to get into. And the audiobook world has sort of satisfied that part of my life. And most recently, I've gotten more into audio dramas and podcasts. And that has been a really exciting thing, because that is in an audiobook situation, you're reading 75% narration and then some character work. But audio dramas allow you to just act, and that's even more thrilling. And I can act 4 or 5 different stories over the course of a month, and as opposed to a 2-month commitment to one play. It's sometimes the variety of it is incredibly rewarding.
Do you find it difficult because you're reading or acting into a microphone as opposed to having an audience, so there isn't an immediate response or a connection? Do you find it difficult or do you find it easy?
That's a great question. I think I rely so much on my imagination, and I use it in different ways in different situations, and I think by now it's pretty strong. You're right. It's any sort of recorded medium like film or TV where you just don't get the response of an audience, and it's funny in some respects. The theater is such a unique opportunity where the audience is feeding you and you're feeling their mood, and I think that's almost a luxury, and why so many performers who do film and TV will want to get in front of an audience, because they tend to do something. Record something, act in a show, a TV show, and then it goes away, and it doesn't air for months later, and then they don't know whether people enjoyed it or not. So, sorry, that's a long way to say that I think my imagination sort of allows me to bridge the gap, and it's such an essential tool of what I do as an actor anyway, that I usually feel like I can survive just acting in a sound booth by myself. Although after a couple hours I'll get pretty punchy. But it comes back to live theater is such an amazing experience because of those wonderful people who come and support it and respond and engage.
What was the first play that you saw?
Oh, I have early memories of my father taking me to the Stratford Festival up in Stratford, Ontario. I have a very vivid memory of the Stratford production of Kiss Me Kate, starring Colm Feore. I think as a young man, what I remembered most was they had these tiny mini. They were even sub Fiat type of little buggies. I remember Petruchio driving on stage in this mini little car and leaping out. And, I don't know why that stands out, but it was so delightful. I remember seeing a production of Cyrano de Bergerac in Toronto with Heath. Nope, not going to get it. And then there were many community theater productions. My parents would take me to the Peterborough Theatre Guild. I'm originally from Peterborough, Ontario, and my dad did a lot of performing. He was both a musical performer and he performed with the Theatre Guild. So I was always around it, and my parents were always great about exposing me to it.
And what was the first show that you did?
Ooh, well, I do know that in kindergarten I played Joseph in the Nativity, and I really was excited by that. I landed the big part. And then there was let's go beyond that. I'll say my first professional show was I graduated from Ryerson Theatre School in Toronto, and that summer I went off to do some summer stock, and I did A Closer Walk with Patsy Cline, which is the Patsy Cline Review, and I played the radio DJ, the little big man, and I would welcome the audience, and I'd talk to them about Patsy, and then I'd talk about her next single, and then she would appear, and she would sing, and then I'd come back and say, we just received a letter from a fan, and we'd work our way through the story that way. And that was my first paying job after school, and I did it in 2 separate summer theaters, and I was off to the races.
When you have free time, do you go to the theater for enjoyment, or do you stay far away from it?
Gosh, that's a great question. I find, sadly, I'm a parent of a 7-year-old, and as soon as you have kids, the prospect of going to see a Broadway show it just becomes more costly and more complicated. So we still go. I think the last, let's see if I can remember the last show. The last show I saw was the film revival of Carousel. But you know, my wife is working for the same producers, so they were offering tickets to the cast. So that was an occasion where the cost of the babysitter was the only cost, as opposed to the cost of the babysitter plus the cost of the tickets and such. So I wish I would love to get to see it more, but I feel, and it's a lame excuse, but as soon as you become a parent, it just becomes a little more complicated.
Now, once Church and State opens in a couple of weeks, you'll have your time to yourself pretty much during the days. Is there something about the Berkshires that you like, or places that you like to explore while you're up here?
What is it about the lovely Berkshires? I know that what I always find is that by the time the show gets on its feet, it almost feels like your time is over. So I know we'll be open, and then we'll have we open on a Saturday, and then we'll have 2 more weeks, and then we'll be done. And in those weeks, I'll have Wednesday matinees, and sorry, that's a strange question, but I mean, I'm staying with a good friend of mine who lives in Lenox, and I love to, you know, on those days where I can roll out of bed and go down to Haven and have breakfast, and that's one of my favorite things. I mean, there's so many great, obviously going to Mass Mocha, and I know that when my son is here, we like to go to it's a ski slope in the wintertime, and in the summertime it is got a water slide, and I can't remember the name of it. I think it's hard to go anywhere and not just feel like, oh, I'm so happy I'm here, rather than being in New York or during the summertime when it's gross and hot.
Yeah, I would think that having lived in New York, and there's something really not nice about it in August, when having the Berkshires would be terrific.
Yeah, it's just being here is, you feel grateful and lucky, and that's why family love to come and visit when we're here as well, because they know my uncle is a sculptor, and he lives up in Quebec, but he will come down here whenever I'm here, because there, as an artist, there are so many wonderful places for him to visit, so many awesome galleries and performance opportunities. So he can't get enough of it.
Graham Rowett, thanks for joining us this morning. I know you've got rehearsal to do, and I look forward to seeing Church and State in a couple of weeks. I never miss an opportunity to go up to Berkshire Theater Group. And if you're interested in tickets, the website is berkshiretheatergroup.org, where you can get tickets to Church and State and some of the other productions that are headed to Berkshire Theater Group this summer. We'll be up there in July 7th, taping a special, which will be running here on Artsbeat Radio and Patrick Barry's Westfield News Show over the course of the month of July. So it's a great place to be. It's their 90th anniversary season, and a great group of people up there. And Graham, I look forward to seeing your show.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks so much.
And next week, we'll have 2 guests with us who are both very much involved in summer theater. One is Terrence Mann, who is the actor who is now the artistic director of the Nutmeg Summer Series at the Connecticut Repertory Theater. They open with a musical called Disaster, and then they produce Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, and they end their season with Jesus Christ Superstar. And also joining us from Goodspeed Musicals, The Will Rogers Follies, is its star, David Lutkin, who some of you may know from seeing him at Theater Works in Hartford in his musical about Woody Guthrie called Woody Says. And David Lutkin was in the original cast of the Will Rogers Follies when it played on Broadway in 1991. And I saw the production when it opened in Goodspeed a couple of weeks ago, and I raved about it in the Westfield News. I called it sensational, and I'm a little bit shocked when I see their ads for Goodspeed and the Will Rogers Follies, and there, blaring across the top of the ad is sensational, the Westfield News Group. Well, I don't use the word sensational that often, but it really is. We'll be back next Friday from 8 to 9. Thanks to Peter Coles, our engineer, for being with us this morning and, keeping everything going afloat. And we are ending today's program with some music for you, and it is Willamania, which is the opening number of the Will Rogers Follies. See you next Friday at 8 o'clock. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.